Hello and welcome. My name is Melissa Galasso, and I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about our newest ASU from FASB. So in August 2020, the FASB issued ASU 2020-06. This is really intended to be a huge simplification of areas that have been somewhat convoluted, somewhat difficult to handle, and trying to really help people find an answer that makes sense. So very often the criticism for some of these convertible instruments in particular is that you get different outcomes for essentially the same type of contract, and so they wanted to minimize this. So this will impact topic 470, which is a debt with conversion and other options, which is subtopic 470.20, as well as topic 815, derivatives and hedging contracts in the entity's own equity, which is in subtopic 815.40. So let's dive on in. So ASU 2020-06 really was designed to reduce cost and complexity, right? So we have a lot of complexity, and as I mentioned, there's an issue related to comparability. So when we looked at these, they're noted that it ends up with a lot of difficulty. In fact, it's an area where there are high financial statement restatements as a result of the complexity and lack of comparability. And so they wanted to really address the complexity for these financial instruments that had characteristics of both liabilities and equity. And I think that this would just overall be a really nice impact. And so their goal was to make things a little bit easier and make sure that the outcome of the accounting was consistent with, the actual transaction. And so similarly designed transactions should end up with similar outcomes from a financial reporting perspective. So the standard really looks at three key areas: convertible instruments, derivative scope exception, and earnings per share. So let's start off with the convertible instruments model. So currently there are 5 accounting models within the convertible debt instruments. And so that can obviously be overwhelming. And so one of the things that this does is reduces the number of accounting models for convertible debt instruments and convertible preferred stock by eliminating the beneficial conversion feature model and the cash conversion model. Now, currently, again, we have 5. We have the embedded derivative model, which is going to stay, which is in topic 815, to account for convertible debt instruments with embedded conversion features that are not clearly and closely related to the host contract, but that meet the definition of a derivative, but do not meet the definition for the criteria for a derivative scope exception. Then we have the cash conversion model, which is going to be eliminated under this. The cash conversion model was actually found in topic 470 to account for convertible debt instruments that may be settled entirely or partially in cash upon conversion. So under this model, the host contract was measured at fair value of a similar debt instrument without the conversion feature, and then the conversion feature was recorded as an equity component at the residual amount. And so that option has gone away. Then we had the beneficial conversion feature model, which was also in topic 470 and is also being removed here. And this was where the convertible debt instrument with conversion features that are in the money at the commitment date or that become in the money at a later date after the occurrence of a contingent event. In that scenario, those features are recorded as equity components at intrinsic value, and the host contract is recorded at the residual amount. So both the beneficial conversion feature model and the cash conversion model would go away. We are going to continue to retain the substantial premium model to account for convertible debt instruments issued at a substantial premium. Those premiums are recorded as paid in capital. And then the traditional convertible debt model in topic 470 to account for other convertible debt as a single debt instrument measured at amortized cost. And so the goal here is to have more convertible debt instruments reported as a single liability and more convertible preferred stock as a single equity instrument. So by removing those two features, we end up with more single models as opposed to bifurcated models, which was really an intent. And then in addition to that, the interest rate of more convertible debt instruments will be closer to the actual coupon interest rate. So that was a huge win for a lot of entities who said, having 5 models that give you different outcomes really does not create great comparability. So there will continue to be some models that are subject to the separation model for those that are with embedded conversion features that are not clearly and closely related, that do meet the definition of derivative and that do not qualify for the scope exception from derivative accounting, as well as convertible debt instruments issued with substantial premiums for which the capitals are going to be paid in capital. So we talked about how those 5 now become 3. However, 2 of the 3 are, as we go through this, are a little bit easier in process. In terms of the derivative scope exception, the entity, when we think about this, has to determine whether an equity contract qualifies for a scope exception from derivative accounting, right? So this is that concept of whether the entity is, indexed to its own stock, which we refer to as the indexation guidance, and whether the contract is equity classified, which is referred to as settlement guidance. And if both of these criteria are not met, the contract is recognized as an asset or liability and potentially accounted for as a derivative instrument. So what this is going to do here is remove 3 additional conditions that are required to qualify for the settlement guidance related to settlements in unregistered sales, collateral requirements, and shareholder rights. So why is that so important? Well, more equity contracts will now qualify for the derivative scope exception because we have 3 less things that we have to consider here. And one of the things that they were trying to look at is that when you look at the derivative scope exception guidance, it results in accounting for some contracts as derivative, while economically similar contracts are accounted for as equity. And so as a result, really trying to bring this together. And so I think that was a really big focus. And then last but not least, our EPS, our earnings per share. This is going to align the diluted earnings per share calculation for convertible instruments by requiring that an entity use the if converted method and requires that share settlement be included in the diluted EPS calculation for both convertible instruments and equity contracts when those contracts include an option of cash settlement or share settlement. So I think here really the focus is to improve the EPS guidance on areas that were specifically in the scope, right? The convertible instruments and the contracts in the entity's own debt. So they were trying to really focus on this. So this standard is going to be effective for public business entities, excluding our SRCs here, our smaller reporting companies, for fiscal years beginning after December 15th of 2021, which would be calendar 22. And for everyone else, including those smaller reporting companies that are technically SEC filers, it would be for fiscal years beginning after December 15, 2023. So you're going to notice here that this would be calendar 24, and that is a 2-year difference. And so the FASB back in November 2019 had this process of determining when something is a major change of not having a 1-year difference between public and private, but having a 2-year difference. And so this is going to be a very big project. However, in there, they do note that this is something that you might want to consider early adopting, even though you have the time and it's not effective for what seems like forever. 2024 sounds like eons away, but we all know it's really not eons away. So as a result, in those scenarios, there is a good option. Early adoption is permitted, but not earlier than fiscal years beginning after December 15th of 2020, including interim periods within that. So if you are going to go through this, this is something to consider for early adoption, simply because it's just a really nice change. One thing to point out, that if you went back to the exposure draft for the standard, which came out in July of 2019, FASB, in addition to the changes here, also proposed simplifying the accounting for equity contracts by reducing a form over substance-based accounting conclusion driven by remote contingent events in the assessment of the derivative scope exception. You will notice that is not included in this standard. Instead, they decided to not include those changes, and they're going to explore improvements as a phase 2 of this. So basically, they're going to create a separate project and to handle that separately. So if that was of interest to you, you're not going to see that in the standard, despite the fact that it was included in that exposure draft, really because they got a lot of various feedback and they needed to go through it. All right, so that is a wrap. So hopefully that's a great high-level overview of what's going on in ASU 2020-06. Obviously, you can take a deep dive into derivative accounting because to really understand the implications, you need to be a little bit more familiar with what's going on in derivative accounting. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you on a future Nano Learning. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.